lounging, son.
Welcome back to another episode of the Comic Class Podcast, guys. I am your host, the Mighty Dilbot, and with me, as always, the Mighty Ryan. It's clobbering time. So, we're here today to talk about. We're here today to talk about Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and David Aja, and building off the hype of the. Honestly, Hawkeye was probably my favorite. Disney Plus series, and if you look at the intro and you look at the cover art that David Aja did, you can tell that a lot of it was influenced by this particular run, especially with the characters they use, like Kazi and the Tracksuit Mafia, the interaction with Kate, and then obviously there's the obvious differences between the series and the cartoon and the comic, but it's essentially a lot of this is essentially derived from Matt Fraction's work, and we love Matt Fraction around here.
The last two episodes I haven't watched just because of work is. I mean, I can't. Well, one of them got spoiled. There's an appearance in there. Somebody spoiled it for me. Yeah. But it was after I saw Spider-Man, so it didn't really make a fucking difference. I kind of already knew. Yeah. Like I think I said it when we did our best of 2021. I think I had watched every episode up besides the last two episodes that. Also, I think that was the week, right? First of all, the minute that they announced the Hawkeye show and used the same logo as this, because this logo first appeared with this series, I'm like, oh, dude, they have to be adapting it. And then they started announcing casting calls, and you're like, okay, that's who that's going to be. Obviously, when they announced Kate Bishop, you kind of already started thinking it, but there was other clues in terms of casting. And I think that just the 6 episodes, right, this season? Exactly. So just the first 4 episodes, the first episode alone, I was just like, it blew me away. I'm like, this is what I want. This is what I want out of a Marvel show. Where they loosely adapt the comic book, so they're honoring it, right? Like, you look at something like WandaVision, you look at something like Loki, those are completely new concepts in terms of what those characters are going through, which is fine too. I enjoy that.
Yeah, I enjoy both of those.
But it's cool to see a run that really meant something to me and to a lot of people, kind of getting an amalgamation of the MCU with that, right? And I think I already kind of shamed you before, so I don't need to shame you now, but I think it took you entirely too long to read this. I don't even understand how you, being more of a Marvel head than I am, did not read this. But that's fine. I'll forgive you.
I'm here now.
You're here now. I'll forgive you. But again, I think I've mentioned it in Green Arrow videos that we've done. For some reason, the Archer characters, I've always gravitated towards, and I think that Hawkeye became a favorite of mine. I think I saw him in West Coast Avengers, but only a couple issues when I was younger. But it was just when he was the leader of the Thunderbolts in the '90s, where I really latched onto him and became a huge fan of his. And right. This is my favorite iteration of Clint Barton. I don't think it takes a certain kind of writer to be able to capture it. I know that Clint wasn't always portrayed exactly in this way, but Matt Fraction builds off of what came before.
Yeah, Matt Fraction is I could easily say I have not been disappointed by Matt Fraction run. Solid. He's solid. He's consistent. There's with his writing, especially with this. This felt like an indie comic. It just so happened to be about Hawkeye. From the script to how one of my favorite things about it was at the start of every issue, it was okay, this looks bad.
Yeah.
Okay, this looks bad. Yeah. And then it goes off into this whole shitstorm that Hawkeye is just getting himself into while he's not being an Avenger, right? And if you take a look at the show, it's kind of the same thing. He's not an Avenger. He's totally working independent of himself, of the Avengers, and that's because of the whole Ronin thing and everything that the MCU Ronin did and his what his relevance to the MCU, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but talking about the Matt Fraction's run, it felt like an indie comic. It just so like I said, it just so happened to have Hawkeye in it. From the script to the way characters were utilized, to the fact that there in the first 2 volumes, there's really no, you don't see any of the big 3, right? You see Wolverine for a second, Captain America is there in flashback. It's really like Hawkeye placed in a street level scenario, right? And usually, with Hawkeye being an Avenger, he's usually like completely separate and apart from all that. But now you give him this kind of street relevance. He found his own spot in New York. It's kind of like how Daredevil has Hell's Kitchen. Oh, Clint has Brooklyn.
Yeah. I love it.
I love that. A lot of jokes about Brooklyn and Jersey, especially with like Kate talking about like, oh, is this part where you and Jay-Z tell me why Brooklyn is the greatest place on the greatest place in New York, and then he's like, I don't even know who Jay-Z is.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the dynamic between them so good is like the age difference.
Yeah.
Like they're two different generations, and she's going back to her introduction in Young Avengers by Alan I think it's Alan Heinberg. I'm probably getting this wrong. And Jim Chung, right? Like all those Young Avengers, like she was a huge fan of Hawkeye, which they also do in the show, right?
Yeah.
And so she this is when he was dead. So he fucking wasn't around. Or I think maybe he had come back as Ronin at that point, but he was dead, so there was no Hawkeye. And so like bringing that aspect into the book and it really being about both Hawkeyes, right? Because they're both using the same code name. It's not like only one of them is using it. And she's constantly like poking at him, right? And and what I love about him is he's always fucked up. He's always got some fucking bandage or bruise or fucking mark on him, which really humanizes him in terms of being an Avenger. It's rare when you see like a superhero, they just all fucked up. Like even Batman, dude. Batman's a human being, dude. He's got no powers, but he never really looks injured for the most part. Like it's rare. Right. This entire run, Clint is fucked up. All the time, dude. He's always looking like
he's either recovering or he's like oh, I got crap for him. I can't do it. And he's the most human out of all the Avengers, and that's like and that's like the truest statement you could ever say about Hawkeye. He's the most human out of all of them because he, in fact, is.
But I think that I think what this particular run built off of was the Matt Fraction, Brubaker, David Aja, Iron Fist book, right? Like that's where Fraction and Aja first worked together, and what they took from that book, what I love too, and I mean that you could even say could have been an indie book. It had such an indie, like energy to it.
Yeah, exactly. The energy, like just how everything is, like. The art and the script makes it feel like such an indie comic. It's like, even if you have no prior knowledge about as to who Hawkeye is, you can just be like, oh, he's, you can jump into this and be like, damn, this is a really well written, self-contained book, apart from Marvel, aside from the villains and all that stuff.
But that's when the runs I think are good is when it's. I think you and I have mentioned it too. Is when it's not tied in to the overall universe, right? Like it's completely self-contained within itself. Yeah, it may have callbacks or reference something, but it's not affected in any way, shape, or form by what's happening in the main main line of books, I guess you could say. But I love David Aja's art. It's fucking full of energy. His panel structure is really dope. He plays around with a lot of interesting like angles and stuff. Forgot which issue it is, but there's one where it's the fucking that's what I was thinking of. The first page of issue 1 is just Clint falling out of a window and like you said, okay, this looks bad.
Okay, this is bad.
So and that's how you open the book. And I remember reading it for the first time and I was just like, I was so stoked. I'm like, this is exactly the type of book I want to be reading from Marvel or DC. And I think at the time DC was firmly entrenched in the New 52. And I had already been like, I'm kind of over this shit. I was only reading Batman and maybe a couple other books, right? So
honestly, like I feel like during 52, I feel like I completely disconnected from anything DC. Like, to be honest.
Yeah, well, they completely disconnected from their loyal fan base for decades by just completely redoing everything. You know, like, oh well, this all counts, but then this doesn't count. Well, that doesn't make sense. You know, like, but that's besides the point. I think Marvel now was really a really exciting time at Marvel. I mean, you had Thor by Jason Aaron, right? You had the Hickman Avengers stuff. The Iron Man, I wasn't really feeling. That was the Kieran Gillen stuff. That one just didn't hit the mark for me.
Was that Superior? Was that Superior? I feel like that was Superior.
No. This is when his brother got reintroduced or got introduced, and to where Anthony Stark isn't his dad, which doesn't make sense because they look exactly the fucking same. But that's not his real son. It just doesn't make sense. But whatever. That's not here nor there. I'm not trying to bash Kieran Gillen, who is a fantastic writer, and I love his comics. That was my least favorite book I've ever read by him, though. But Hawkeye, by far, was... I might even go so far as to say, like, I liked it better than Thor at the time when I was reading it, because it's just a different type of book. Like, I love Thor, but...
I feel like Thor, like, the whole picture of Thor is fantastic. With this, like I said, like we said, being self-contained, smaller. You said only 4 volumes. You know, that's what, like 20-something issues. Yeah. Whereas Thor was like a whole 7-year epic. It was literally like the Iliad. But you know, that's Jason Aaron's Iliad. That's exactly pretty much like the best way I can describe that. And this is like, you know, this is smaller, so it's you can appreciate more because there's no filler. It's consistent. Like, for the first 2 volumes that I read, it's been consistent story after story after story after story after, you know, issue after issue after issue. That's just like kept me enthralled. I literally read volume 1 and 2 in a day and a half, and I was like, man, this is fucking great.
Yeah, I think I think every time I read it in like one sitting. I don't get up. I just knock it out. Because I've said I've read it multiple times. I read it in singles, minus the first arc. I think I like I said, I read it in the trade. But it is such a great book, and it's so good on a reread also. Like, no matter how many times you read it, I still get that same feeling of like joy and excitement of reading the book. Yeah, and I loved it every month it came out. Every time it came out. I think there was like a really huge gap in between issues at one point. Can't remember when, but it was like towards the tail end of the run. So like really like lost momentum for me. So I had to reread everything like to lead up to when it came out. But.
Like I said, like I plowed through the first 2 and like the first 2 volumes, and there's this energy about it that is just like, you know, it's a light. It's not. I wouldn't say it's more so like a light read in the sense that, you know, it's like, you know, mostly just panels of action, which there's plenty of. But it's you can absorb it really fast without there being too much like, like, I don't know. It's not heavy, and it's not like reading Hickman. It's not like reading Alan Moore. But there's this. They just give you all the information you need. It's all self-contained, and then you don't need any other knowledge aside from that. And I really appreciate that. You know, I like Hawkeye's. I like Hawkeye human. Like, you know, we can talk about that a lot. But it's literally just Hawkeye just trying to just all in all be a good person, right? But at the same time, he's very self-destructive, which is, you know, kind of an ongoing theme from what I'm getting.
Always with women too.
Yeah. Oh man, when they get in the second volume, when they do the girlfriends, the
Black Widow and Mockingbird,
the wife, the ex-wife, the current girlfriend, and then
yeah, I know, it's awesome. You know what else I think is like something that should be mentioned is Matt Hollingsworth's colors, because he's constantly putting different hues of purple throughout the book, even when it's not.
I love how color coordinated Kate Bishop is.
Yeah.
Everything purple. Everything purple. Yeah. She has a purple VW. She has a purple VW bug. like the only thing that I wish was also purple was the Challenger that he buys. Yeah. Also, that's another thing too. Like the car chase scene in the Hawkeye series was one of my favorite like, you know, sequences in the whole Disney Plus era of series. And like the simple fact that it's completely derived from this, it's the ice. It's the cherry on top of the sundae, bro. This is.
Yeah, the only thing I wish that we could have got would have been like the moments in here that you can't do in the show, right? That you can't do in the MCU, which is like him owning the building and hiding out there. You can't do that, right? Like, 'cause he's married, he has kids. You can't do the girlfriends. Like, that interaction, even if it was just like 10 minutes in an episode, to me, I would have been dying.
Oh my god!
You know, like, I would have been cracking up. But like, I agree. I think that just taking a character, I mean, I guess he is, like, he was never considered A-list, you know, like, he's considered like a tertiary character in the Avengers. Like, nobody ever thought he's like a main one until the movie.
There used to be a game on Sega. It was Captain America and the Avengers, and I remember it was Vision, Hawkeye, Captain America, and Iron Man. Those were the 4 characters. And I remember everyone was like, "I'm not Hawkeye. I'm not Hawkeye. I'm not Hawkeye," because we had the multi-tap where you can plug in multiple controllers, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
And then you could do like 4 players, and then we were like, okay, like it was literally to the point where no one wanted to be Hawkeye, where you actually had to play a lot rock paper scissors for it. And that kind of like, you know, says the kind of popularity that the character has had through the years. But I think that the MCU has really brought out how much of a badass he is, and I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that it's made him a more known character.
Yeah.
Where people did it's everything that's been in the MCU. People didn't know. Nobody knew who the fuck the Guardians of the Galaxy was. Really, the majority of the public didn't even know who the fuck Iron Man was. If I'm being honest, I don't think a majority of the public knew who Iron Man was. People know who Spider-Man is. People knew who Captain America was just because of the significance of Captain America, you know? But I don't think Iron Man was a household name. Hulk was a household name, more so than Iron Man and Captain America, because he had a show in the 70s, cartoon series. 70s.
Yeah, and then not to mention the Eric Bana Hulk with Gary Busey.
Gary Busey. Look at Nick Nolte. We call him Gary.
Was it Nick Nolte? Oh,
yeah.
They're literally the same person. I don't care.
That's going to be the best part of this episode for people when they listen to it or watch it. Dylan called Eric Bana's dad Gary Busey in the whole movie. But yeah, I think, look, bottom line is this book, like, I'm just looking at the credits, you know, just for the first hardcover, which is the first 11 issues plus Young Avengers Presents 6. You have Matt Fraction writing, David Aja, Javier Polito, Steve Lieber, Jesse Ham, Francesco.
Steve Lieber.
I know. Annie Wu, Alan Davis, and Matt Hollingsworth. Like, dude, you just have like so much talent on this. And I know what we mainly mentioned David Aja, but that's because, like, to me, like, that's the name synonymous for me with the book. Even though he didn't draw every issue, I think he came up with the style of the book. He came up with the design of it that the rest of the artists that continued to work on the book kind of riffed off of. You know, like in terms of just the way everything was depicted. You know. Yeah. Just a very down-to-earth story. Every single story is somewhat down-to-earth. Even the villain, the clown or whatever, the clown.
Yeah, I loved his character. Like he's in volume 2, but I definitely loved his character. But yeah, we circle back to David Aja and how he kind of set the tone. Honestly, the covers themselves I feel like set the tone for it. They gave it kind of like a pulp feel to it, right? Aside from the Young Avengers, obviously, but like every single issue, like it was a very, very pulp feel to it. Like I don't know, it was like a modern twist on like late 70s, early 80s comics, like that. I just love about it. Like this, but from the high contrast to like to the different hues, of colors to like set the mood. Like, dude, this is one of the most solid books that Marvel put out. Like
I also think it like makes you care about Clint, where other stories I've read with him, while I liked him as a character, like when I was younger, I didn't really like he never really had that much of a personality to me. He did, but he didn't. This one humanizes him in a way that makes you like you care about him. Even though like he can be kind of like douchey or he can be kind of cocky, right? Like much like the distinguished competitions, Archer, Green Arrow is the same way. Like I think both of them are kind of similar in that respect, both ladies, men. But I think that this just put him in a place that you never saw him in before. Kind of like a father figure type, right? Even though I don't know how much the age difference is. Like, I don't know. I know she's a teenager, but he's obviously I would say in here maybe his 30s. He's definitely not as old as he is in the MCU. For sure.
I really like too is just the relationship between him and Kate. Like we could talk about that. Like it's total mentorship, but also you can see his admiration for this generation. It's not like he sees them as they're moving in to try to push us out. No, this is like when I'm done, when Hawkeye's done, these are the guys that's going to take over. And he had such a crazy respect for not only for Kate Bishop but the rest of the Young Avengers. You know what I mean? And and I really appreciate that about that the Young Avengers issue 6, where it's where they talk about the whole competition between Kate and him and getting the bow and arrow back, and then how he gifts the picture of the original Avengers, when they're all super young and like all doe-eyed, like he knows that this isn't a forever gig, and he understands that there's an end to this, and when it's over for him doesn't mean it's over for the Avengers. It just carries on with a different generation, and he respects that. Whereas other characters are just like, meh, no, they're not gonna come in and do my job, blah, 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 blah. But like, no, he's like the most forward thinking in that regard,
Yeah, and I think that the dynamic between the two of them, they both need each other. Like she takes care of him kind of, but she also needs Clint. I think that it's not a codependent relationship, but I think that they kind of like they fill that void that each one of them has in their lives. Yeah. Like her dad's kind of a piece of shit. Always was. Her family, like she doesn't like get along with her family, and she comes from a lot of money. He comes from nothing. This dude was living in a circus, when he was a kid with his brother.
Trained by Jack DeCane, who also makes an appearance in in the Hawkeye series.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Jack DeCane is the guy who's trying to marry Kate's mom in the series.
That's Swordsman.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not his brother. That's the guy that trains him. In the comics, it's the guy that trains him.
Yeah, I know. In the comic, it's the guy that trains him.
Yeah.
But he makes an appearance as the guy who's trying to marry Kate's mom. Which I
guess that makes sense that that's him. He's such an asshole on that show. I hated him from the get-go.
Finish the last 2 episodes. He's fine.
All right.
I like Jack. We like Jack.
Yeah. It's very rare when I say that I think that like a run is an essential reading for. I'll even divide it into publishers for Marvel. To me, this would be an essential Marvel run that I think you can handle any generation of reader, and I think this will be one of those runs that's just timeless. That no matter when you read it, it won't feel dated, and I think that 20 years from now, people can read this. 30 years from now, and I think people will enjoy it just as much as they did the day it came out.
Yeah. No. This is 100% because like when did this come out? 2011, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and look, it's 2022. 10 years later, it's still there's nothing about it. Like you said, nothing about it feels dated. Nothing about it. That's the great thing about it too, because the look, the feel, everything about it, it doesn't feel old. It doesn't feel new. It feels like that sweet spot of Marvel history where it's just like you can read it anywhere. Kind of like like Frank Miller's Daredevil run. Yes, there's obviously there's a certain 90s feel to it, but it's one of those things where it's timeless, where it doesn't feel like you're reading something in the 80s. It doesn't feel like you're reading something from the 70s. It doesn't feel like you're reading something that old, and it just doesn't feel dated.
It's not like reading Claremont's X-Men. I'll be the one to say I'll be the one to say it, because that shit is so hard to read. to where I'm like,
let's clarify. Claremont's '80s X-Men run, because like when it was Jim Lee Claremont for a while, like that got a little better. It's just a lot of dialogue, a lot of Magneto monologue, but
walls of text.
We're talking about whole ass pages, but there's that's not this. That is not Hawkeye. Hawkeye, if you like the series, you're gonna love the comic, because I'm loving the comic. I like the comic way more. The same could be said about a lot of things. I love the comic way more than the series, but you can see where that the showrunners really appreciated it too. Like right down to the Trust the Bro moving company. I love that.
I mean, I think that Kevin Feige just knows what to do to make certain things work. Films, shows. I think he's like the perfect person to be doing it.
Yeah, and that's why I really love the fact that Kevin Feige is bringing back some characters. I love it. He's bringing back some homies, bro.
You can say it. I don't care. Spoiler. If you don't want to hear, you can say it.
Yeah, bro. He brought back Vincent D'Onofrio as freaking Kingpin, and it was great. Like, it was great.
He brought back fucking Charlie Cox as Daredevil.
I haven't seen it yet, but I know because like the internet sucks.
You haven't seen the fucking movie?
I haven't seen it yet,
dude.
I know.
I'll say it right now because we're not reviewing the movie. You haven't seen it. It is my favorite comic of all time.
That's kind of like the feeling that I'm getting, because like even people who like aren't down with like a lot of like of the MCU stuff, like they're like, yo, it has everything you could ever want in a Spider-Man movie.
I have not. It's rare when I get choked up in a movie, but I felt my eyes welling up at moments. I felt that thing in the pit of my throat where I'm just like, and I was like,
yeah.
And at the end of it, I was just like, dude, I want to go see it again. I would have gone to see it again that night if I was by myself. I would have just bought tickets to see it again, because like that's a movie that I'll watch over and over. I think they knocked it out of the park. To me, it was flawless. I'm sure people can find stuff wrong with it, but yeah. Anyways, but Hawkeye is. I mean, the show, like I said, I haven't finished it, but just the 4 episodes that I saw, not including the last 2, to me that show was pretty close to perfect in terms of what I expected. I was not disappointed as I was watching it. Like, I knew that they were going to change some stuff, obviously, based on, like what we talked about. Like, this Clint is a very different Clint than the MCU's version, right? But I think I think they did a great job, I think that you can't ask for more from a comic book, from a Marvel comic book, than the type of book you got here.
Yes.
Just like you couldn't ask for more from like the type of the MCU shows.
It's kind of like how I feel about Black Widow's current run right now, right? Because like when we reviewed Black Widow, we said there was a lot of the same things we kind of said, right? Like, it felt like an indie comic. The art was fantastic. Like, when Marvel does stuff like this, when they kind of let their writers kind of like take hold of the lore and put their own spin to it, like, it's fantastic. Matt Fraction is doing an incredible job. Kelly Thompson is doing an incredible job. Like, these are 2 books, and it's funny because it's Black Widow and Hawkeye, but these are 2 characters that's like, they're not superpowered at all, but they quite possibly have my most favorite runs of all time within Marvel. Marvel superheroes, synonymous for superheroes, right?
Mm.
But like easily becoming favorites, 2 total humans.
What's really upsetting is that Brubaker and Aha were gonna do Spider-Man, but they wouldn't take Dan Slott off the fucking book. I know.
Dan Slott had 1 good run, and it was Silver Surfer.
I mean, it's kind of how I feel about like what Jeff Johns did. He was holding Legion of Superheroes hostage, and Hickman wanted to write Legion at DC.
That would have been dope.
But instead, they got him over to Marvel to do X-Men. Now, it's funny. Like, I know this is going off topic, but Nick asked me, he's like, if you could have picked Hickman or Bendis to come to DC, I was like, Hickman. I'm like, why is it even like a question? You know what I mean? Like Ben, I was not excited
about. Can you imagine
about
Hickman's Superman? What?
Well, I mean, just his Legion, like what he could do. I think he could make a whole new generation a fan of Legion of Superheroes, which was a top seller in the 80s. That was a fucking perennial top seller. It had like 2 spin-off series, I believe, at least 1 spin-off. But no,
I would like Hickman to do something like kind of a little more grand. Like if Hickman would do like New Gods, I feel like that'd be really crazy. You know, something more grand. Like I just feel like if Hickman would have went to DC instead of Bendis, I feel like the trajectory of the DC universe would have definitely changed.
Yeah, for the better.
Yeah, I feel like we wouldn't have got Metal.
Yeah.
Death Metal.
I didn't mind Death Metal. I mean,
Death Metal was a Jerry Bruckheimer blockbuster summer.
I mean, I think that's what it was meant to be, though. It basically was a vehicle to make everything matter in DC's long history of multiverses and fucking whatever the fuck, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, let's cap off Hawkeye. I think that anybody, whether you are a fan of superhero comics or you're not a fan of superhero comics, I think that this is one of those books that you could pick up regardless. You know, like I think we always use Jen as an example. I think Jen could read this and enjoy it, in my opinion. You know, I think
I was actually telling Jen how she would enjoy The Good Asian.
I think she would like that too.
Yeah,
that's a solid fucking book. But
great book. Oh.
Yeah. But I think that this, to me, like, you know, every time I read it, it's always just as good as the time before. And I always give this this is a 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, no matter the grading skill that you're on. I think that the art's good, no matter which artist, which art or story that you're reading within the first 2 volumes. I mean, I guess we basically covered the first 2 volumes. I mean, I don't think we really talked about plot, but whatever.
Because the first volume, because it's kind of all. I'm not gonna say it's all over the place, but like they kind of explore different things of like Hawkeye lore and what Hawkeye's relevance into things, especially with with the tape and like covert ops and stuff like that, and then like and then his relevance in Brooklyn, and then they transfer off to like New Jersey. That was one of my favorite like little story arcs though. I think it was in volume 2 where he goes to New Jersey. No, when he goes to Queens or something and it gets flooded, and that stuff with grills. Like that was one of my favorite stories. That was some really.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite issues was the one with the girlfriends. Like that shit had me dying, dude. You know, like because he just rolls through fucking lives, and he just like, and they love him, but they hate him at the same time. And that's what he is. Clint Barton is just that lovable douchebag. You know,
yeah, I mean, our lovable douchebag.
Yeah. But I think that this is I think it is. It's one of the best runs in Marvel's history. Not just in the last 10 years or the last 20 years. I think that this will go down 100 years from now. Right? Let's say 100. I'll go far out. 100 years from now, I think that this will be looked upon as an essential run in Marvel's history.
Yeah.
That's how good I think it is. And it's small. It's not even that big.
And exactly. And the fact that it's so small, it's not daunting to if I was to suggest someone, read Jason Aaron, but you got to read the whole thing, that's 7 years worth of comics. Whereas this, it's like 4 trade paperbacks. Like that's like the size of a small omnibus.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if you look at the type of comics that try to emulate this and copy the style, they just couldn't do it. Like everybody was trying to do a Hawkeye type book, and it just didn't work. And I think that that's because you can't replicate the talent that.
Sometimes you can't catch lightning in a bottle twice, man.
That's true. That's all I got though. I don't have anything else to say about it.
Yeah. Maybe either way, go read it. I highly, strongly recommend it. I'm still reading through it myself. I'm probably gonna do the next two volumes next week. I mean, aside from Miracle Man that we're doing, which is gonna be a good one. Aside from Miracle Man, I'm gonna read Doom Patrol, and then the following week I'm gonna go back into my smaller thing. I'm reading the Grant Morrison Doom Patrol. I've never read it, so I'm pretty excited.
It's not for everybody. It's not, like my brother didn't really care for it, but I liked it.
Yeah, I also love just like talking about flex mentality, like explaining flex mentality to people. So
have you read Flex Mentality?
No, that's a lie. I know enough about flex mentality. I know enough about flex mentality to know that I would love it.
Okay, you should read that book too by Frank with Grant and Frank Quitely. That book is fucking really dope.
Frank Quitely and who?
And Grant Morrison. It's a 4-issue series. I have the hardcover, but you can borrow it or something. But anyways, go pick up Hawkeye. If you've never read it, pick it up. If you watch the show and you want something to read, definitely get the book. And if you've read it before, go read it again.
Go read it again.
It's always good. And if you're not already following us, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at The Comic Lounge. Follow Dylan. Really smooth. Follow Dylan on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll let you do the handles.
Dillbot on Twitter and the Dillbot on Instagram.
All right, cool. And then hit the like, follow, subscribe, all that stuff. And throw your comments and suggestions down below. We always like to see those. And on that note, we're out.
Later, buds.